My neighbors are drunk trash goblins, and one of them took a shit on my porch literally. I bought a small house in southern Illinois after saving for years. I work IT support from home, so I don't need to be anywhere fancy. The house isn't huge, but it's mine. A two-bedroom with a sloping roof, faded green siding, and a porch swing that creaks in the wind. It's on a sleepy street lined with maple trees and older folks who mow their lawns at the same exact time every Saturday morning like it's a synchronized event. I moved in during early spring. The kind of weather where you wear a hoodie in the morning and regret it by noon. The neighborhood felt perfect. No loud kids, no barking dogs, no traffic. I imagined reading on the porch, grilling on weekends, maybe finally getting around to painting miniatures again. You know, normal quiet guy stuff. My neighbors on the left were a married couple, probably in their late 30s, early 40s, named Evan and Trish. A little off, but nothing that set off alarms. When I first moved in, they came over with beers in their hands and big grins. Evan wore flip-flops with socks and handed me a cold Bud Light, like we were old college buddies. "Oh, new guy? Drinking here on Mondays is a tradition," he said, like that meant something. I took the beer, smiled, and made small talk for 15 minutes before retreating inside. The first few weeks were fine. They waved when I mowed the lawn. Sometimes I'd hear them arguing at night, muffled through the walls when the windows were open. Nothing dramatic, just voices rising and falling like waves hitting the shore. Trish had a laugh like a smoker's cough, and Evan always seemed a little too excited about his grill. He once shouted across the lawn asking if I wanted to come over for a rib night, which I politely declined. Then came the porch visits. It started small. Evan would wander over while I was sitting outside and just not leave. He'd pull up one of my chairs, crack a beer, and start talking about stuff I didn't care about. His fantasy football league. Some guy at work who microwaved fish. Trish's new obsession with crystals. I tried to be polite, I really did. But there's only so much nodding and fake chuckling a man can do before he starts losing his mind. It escalated fast. They started showing up uninvited. I'd come home from grocery shopping and find them on my porch. "We figured we'd hang out until you got back," Trish said once, holding a container of deviled eggs like that justified the trespass. Another time, they let themselves into my backyard and were swimming in my above-ground pool, a janky thing I hadn't even finished cleaning yet. Evan said, "Man, this thing is great in the heat. You're a legend for setting it up." Like I did it for them. I finally told them I needed some space. I said it as kindly as I could. "Hey, I work a lot, and I'm kind of a private guy. Hope you understand." Trish pouted and said, "We were just being neighborly." Evan mumbled something about people not knowing how to be friendly anymore. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. The next morning, there was a dead possum on my porch. I don't know if it was some twisted message or just bad luck, but the timing freaked me out. I texted my cousin, who's a cop in Carbondale, and he told me to start documenting everything. "It's probably nothing," he said. "But weirdos don't start at 10, they build up to it." The weirdness did build. One day, Evan rang my doorbell at 7 a.m. I was still in boxers and a t-shirt. He looked wide-eyed and whispered, "Do you have bleach?" "Bleach." He leaned in, glancing over his shoulder. "Trish spilled something. It's a whole mess." I said I didn't have any, closed the door, and watched through the peephole as he stood there for a full minute before walking back home. That night, I heard what sounded like furniture being thrown around next door. Then, silence. Then a loud, slow knock on my back door. I didn't open it. Instead, I turned off all the lights and sat in the corner with a kitchen knife in my hand like a paranoid maniac. The knock didn't come again. 2 days later, a raccoon got into my trash and scattered it across the yard. Not weird on its own, but I found one of my socks in the middle of the mess. A sock I hadn't worn in weeks. A sock I was certain I hadn't thrown out. I checked my laundry. A few pairs were missing. I couldn't prove anything, but the air around my house felt wrong. Like something had shifted. I stopped using the porch, closed the curtains, started parking in the garage. I thought maybe they'd get the hint. But instead, Trish started leaving baked goods on my doorstep. Banana bread, cookies, once a pie with a cracked crust, and no note. The kind of food you'd find in a dream right before something awful happens. Then one night, the power went out. Only in my house. The rest of the block was lit up like normal. I called the utility company, and they said there were no outages in the area. I checked the breaker. Everything looked fine. I flicked switches, reset outlets. Nothing. It came back on 2 hours later with no explanation. The next day, I found a sticky note on my car windshield. In all caps, "Trust US next time." No signature. Just those words. I filed a police report. There wasn't much they could do. No camera footage, no witnesses. But they did agree to send a patrol car down my street a couple times a week. It helped. For a while. Then last week, I came home and my front door was unlocked. I never forget to lock my door. I'm borderline obsessive about it. I walked inside. every sense on high alert, and found nothing. Nothing stolen. Nothing broken. Nothing obviously touched. But the remote was on the couch instead of the coffee table. My mail was stacked differently. A glass I hadn't used was sitting in the sink. Someone had been in my house. I changed the locks that night. Installed a security system. Started sleeping with a baseball bat next to the bed. Yesterday, I looked out the window and saw Evan on his porch, staring right at me. Just standing there. Not smoking, not drinking, just watching. He didn't wave. He didn't smile. He didn't look away. I closed the curtain and sat on the floor behind the couch for 20 minutes before I could make myself get up. I don't know what they want. I don't know if they're just weird or if something darker is going on. But I bought this place for peace and quiet. And now every night, I fall asleep wondering what the hell is going to happen next. Their names are Doug and Kendra. I found that out during week 2, when Doug hollered it across the yard at 11 a.m. because he couldn't get his Bluetooth speaker to connect and apparently thought I might know how to fix it. Hey neighbor, Doug and Kendra here. We party hard, just so you know. He said that like it was a warning and a badge of honor. Doug looks like he could have played bass for a Lynyrd Skynyrd cover band in the late 90s, but aged out before ever picking up the instrument. Always shirtless, always holding a can of natural ice, and always, somehow, barefoot, even when it's raining. Kendra's got this matted bleach blonde hair that might have seen a brush once in the last presidential administration. She wears a red bathrobe like it's her actual skin and smokes so many Newports the entire side of their house smells like a burning tire wrapped in bacon grease. She's got this massive faded tattoo on her upper arm that says, "Trust no bitch," in shaky cursive. Sometimes I wonder if she did it herself in the bathroom with a safety pin and eyeliner. They start drinking around 10. Not brunch drinking, not casual mimosa on the patio drinking. I mean serious pounding. Doug brings out a 24-pack like he's setting up for tailgate Sunday, and by noon, he's screaming at the lawnmower even though it hasn't worked since the first week I moved in. Kendra usually joins him around 11:30 with her robe dragging through the gravel like she's some demented suburban ghost. She pours vodka into a big gulp cup and tops it off with Red Bull or Mountain Dew, depending on the mood. Sometimes both. I tried to be polite at first. I really did. The first time they waved at me over the fence, I waved back. The second time Doug yelled something about pissing excellence while pissing on his own shed, I looked the other way and went inside. I thought maybe they were just having a rough week. Maybe things would calm down. They did not calm down. By the end of week 3, I knew their fight schedule better than my own work meetings. Doug gets aggressive when he's been on the brown liquor. Kendra gets louder when her music stops. She plays this one playlist over and over. 90s or /&B, some early 2000s pop, a little Kid Rock, and when it stops, she loses her mind. One afternoon, she threw her speaker into the street and screamed at the clouds like they were personally responsible for the Spotify outage. Doug just laughed and peed behind the trash cans. Every evening is the same. Shouting, slurred singing, the sound of aluminum cans clattering against their chain-link fence. One night, I smelled something awful and thought maybe something had died under my porch. Nope. Doug had passed out on a lawn chair and pissed himself, then rolled over into the flower bed. Kendra came out and hosed him down while still smoking, muttering about how this was not the life she was promised. I watched the whole thing through my blinds, frozen halfway between disgust and disbelief. She sprayed him like you'd hose down a farm animal. He didn't even flinch. They don't work. Doug calls himself a repairman, but I've yet to see him fix a single thing. He carries around an old Craftsman toolbox and sometimes talks to it like it's a dog. He once tried to offer me help with a leaking faucet, even though I never asked. I made the mistake of saying, maybe next time. And for 3 straight days he stood by the fence waiting with a wrench in one hand and a beer in the other like some kind of deranged plumber in residence. Kendra sells stuff on Facebook Marketplace. I use the word sells loosely. It's mostly old clothes, stained furniture, and sometimes things I swear I saw in my own recycling bin the week before. One time I saw her list a used dog crate as lightly haunted, still holds animals. The cops came once. Someone down the block must have finally snapped. It was a Tuesday night, around 11:45. I'd just gone to bed when I heard Kendra yelling about her constitutional rights and Doug trying to hide behind a grill that hadn't worked since 2009. The cops didn't arrest them, just gave them a warning and told them to keep it down. That lasted all of 5 hours. The next morning, Doug had written "Freedom" in chalk on the driveway, and Kendra was dancing barefoot in a kiddie pool with a cigarette in each hand. It's not just the noise or the chaos. It's the feeling that nothing will ever change. Like this is it. Like I've moved next to a permanent party that forgot what it was celebrating 10 years ago, but refuses to shut the music off. Every time I think maybe it'll slow down. Maybe they'll burn out or finally pass out for good. They come back louder, drunker, and more determined to turn this quiet cul-de-sac into their personal dive bar. One afternoon, I caught Doug stapling empty beer cans to the side of his shed. He called it art. Kendra nodded solemnly and said, "That's culture. I've started wearing noise-canceling headphones most days just to get through work. I can't open my windows anymore. The last time I tried, Kendra threw a meatball at a squirrel and missed so badly it landed in my backyard. The squirrel took the meatball and ran, and I haven't seen it since. I don't blame it. If I could run, I would too." The first real warning sign, and I mean the moment it clicked for me that maybe I'd made a very bad decision moving here, was when my lawnmower disappeared. I had one of those compact gas push mowers I'd bought secondhand off a retired guy back in St. Louis. Nothing fancy, but it ran smooth and cut clean. I kept it in my shed, right behind the house, tucked between a stack of fertilizer bags and an old cooler I hadn't used since college. One afternoon, I went out to mow the lawn and the shed door was open. Not wide open, just enough that I immediately knew I hadn't left it that way. I walked inside and felt that weird, quiet dread crawl down the back of my neck. The mower was gone. Nothing else. Not the rusted rake, not the half bag of bird seed, not even the spider-covered camping chair I'd meant to throw out. Just the mower. At first, I thought maybe I was losing it. Maybe I'd moved it to the garage and forgot. Maybe I'd lent it to someone and didn't remember. I checked everywhere, even dug through the side of the porch in case I'd left it out after the last mow. Nothing. It was just gone. I didn't go straight to accusing anyone. I wanted to believe this was just some weird oversight, like maybe someone mistook my shed for theirs. But I only have one neighbor close enough to mistake anything. And he's got a porch full of beer cans and a girlfriend who stores her cigarettes in an old baby shoe. A week goes by. I borrow a weed whacker from a guy down the street to keep the worst of the grass in check, trying to push the missing mower out of my mind. And then, one evening, I hear the unmistakable chug of a gas mower starting up. That sputter and hum is burned into my memory, so I glance out the window, and there he is, Doug. Shirtless, naturally, wearing cargo shorts, socks up to his calves, and pushing my damn lawn mower like he's doing me a favor. I step outside, still in my work clothes, walk halfway across my yard, and call out, "Hey, Doug." He turns, grinning like a kid caught sneaking cookies. "Yo, that's mine, isn't it?" I ask, pointing at the mower. "That looks exactly like my mower." Doug wipes his forehead with the back of his hand, then gestures broadly like he's on stage. "No, man. We borrowed it. All the neighbors share things around here. Aren't you one of us?" He said it with this weird, performative sincerity, like we were in a club I never signed up for. Like taking something without asking was part of the vibe, part of the unspoken community code that apparently everyone knew but me. I just stared at him. "You didn't ask." Doug laughed like I'd told a joke. "Didn't figure you'd mind. You weren't using it. And hey, I put gas in it. Premium stuff too. That counts for something, right?" He went right back to mowing, like that settled it. Just turned around and started cutting a sloppy, crooked path across his crabgrass-filled yard like it was the most natural thing in the world. I didn't say anything else. Just stood there, watching him. I could feel the heat climbing up my neck, that slow, simmering rage you get when you realize someone's decided your boundaries are optional. But what do you do in that moment? Yell? Call the cops over a mower? March over and yank the thing back mid-lap? I didn't trust Doug not to throw a beer can at my head, and I didn't want to be the guy who starts a full-blown neighbor war 3 weeks after moving in. So I just went back inside, sat at the kitchen table, and stared at my coffee mug for a long time. Later that night, I found a small dent in the side of the mower and 2 deep scratches along the handlebar. He'd run over something, probably a brick or a rusted toy buried in their lawn. When I finally got it back 2 days later, it was low on oil and smelled like something had burned inside the engine. I didn't say a word to him about it. I just started locking the shed with a padlock. And that's when I realized this wasn't a one-time thing. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was how it was going to be. Their yard is a disaster. Not just messy or overgrown or cluttered. I mean an actual, active dump site. At this point, I wouldn't be surprised if the EPA showed up with hazmat suits and a clipboard. The grass, if you can even call it that, is mostly patches of dirt and cigarette butts. The rest is covered in sun-bleached lawn chairs, plastic kiddie pools filled with God knows what, and a rusted swing set that creaks like a horror movie every time the wind hits it. There's an upside-down shopping cart by the fence that Kendra once used to grill hot dogs. No joke. She just laid foil across the bottom and lit charcoal underneath like it was perfectly normal. But none of that compares to what they do to my yard. See, their property ends where the chain-link fence begins, but apparently, they believe the rest of the neighborhood is fair game for their garbage. I didn't notice it right away, because I wasn't checking that far corner of my backyard every day. But once I started, it became impossible to ignore. At first it was little things, empty beer cans, cigarette packs, a crushed paper plate with barbecue sauce still smeared across it. I chalked it up to wind, maybe raccoons. But then came the microwave. A whole broken microwave, cord cut, covered in dried cheese, and something that might have once been spaghetti. Just lying there behind the shed like it had fallen from the sky. I stared at it for a full minute before walking next door. Doug answered the door in nothing but mesh shorts and socks. "Yo," he said, blinking at me like I'd woken him from a dream. "There's a microwave in my yard," I said. He grinned. "Oh yeah? That thing finally died. Kendra said to get rid of it, so I chucked it. Must have bounced over. Gravity, you know? You threw it over the fence." "Didn't think it'd make it all the way, honestly," he said, like I was supposed to be impressed. That was the last time I tried reasoning with them, because it got worse. One morning, I found a cardboard box sitting in the grass right outside the back gate. No markings, just duct tape wrapped around it like a kid tried to mummify the thing. It stank. Like actual rot. I opened it, praying it wasn't an animal corpse, and inside was a stack of used diapers. Not baby diapers. Bigger. Weirder. Soaked and swollen and sticking to the sides of the box. I gagged, dropped the whole thing, and ran back inside to wash my hands even though I hadn't touched anything. I texted a photo of the box to my cousin again, the one who told me to document everything. He called me 10 seconds later and just said, "What the hell, man?" I said, "You tell me." That night, I stood by the fence and watched. I was done being surprised. And sure enough, around 9 p.m., Kendra came stumbling into their yard holding a tiny dog in one arm and what looked like a stack of diapers in the other. The dog, a trembling, bug-eyed Pomeranian with pink bows on its ears, was wearing a baby onesie and one of those overnight pull-up diapers taped on around its waist. She giggled like it was the funniest thing in the world. "Princess had another accident," she shouted, even though no one was around. Then she peeled the thing off, dumped it in a plastic bag, and hurled it over the fence like she was competing in the Olympics. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I went inside before she noticed me, sat down at my desk, and just stared at the wall for a while. Who the hell puts diapers on a dog for fun? And more importantly, who decides the neighbor's yard is the right place to toss them when they're full? By the end of the week, my yard had become some kind of designated dumping ground. A rotting cushion from a lawn chair, a milk crate full of burned-out candles, an actual stuffed raccoon holding a tiny American flag. I'm not making that up. I found it by the fence, glassy eyes staring up at me like even it was confused how it got there. I started taking photos of everything. Time-stamped, geotagged, the whole deal. I wasn't sure what I'd do with them, but something about documenting it made me feel slightly less crazy. Because when you walk out your back door and find 3 beer cans stacked in a triangle next to a chewed-up diaper, it helps to know you're not imagining it. Doug saw me taking pictures one afternoon and shouted across the yard, "Hey, that's private property, man." I didn't respond. He laughed like he'd made a good joke and wandered back inside, holding a leaf blower that I'm pretty sure used to belong to the guy 2 houses down. I put up a camera, mounted it on the back porch, pointed right at the fence line. I didn't tell them. I didn't need another conversation about how everyone shares around here, or how the dog thinks your grass is softer. I just wanted to know how much worse it was going to get. Turns out, a lot worse. But that's a different mess entirely. The noise was bad enough. The music, the shouting, the drunken karaoke renditions of Picture by Kid Rock and Sheryl Crow that made my walls vibrate like I lived next to a broken jukebox in hell that I could almost live with. I bought better headphones, installed weather stripping on the windows, even started falling asleep with brown noise playing on a loop. But nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, prepared me for the excrement. It started with a smell. That's how it always starts, doesn't it? A low, sour funk that drifted in through the back window one morning while I was eating toast. At first I thought maybe an animal had gotten into the trash again, or maybe something had died under the porch. I went outside with a trash bag and gloves, trying not to gag. But I didn't find a raccoon or even spilled garbage. What I found was a human turd. Right under the back fence, close to the corner where their yard meets mine, still steaming in the cool air like a twisted kind of message. I stood there frozen. For a second I honestly didn't know what I was looking at. I thought maybe the dog had gotten through and done its business there, but then I remembered, the dog wears diapers. And I mean full-on taped-up toddler-sized pull-ups like a deranged Build-A-Bear. So this wasn't the dog. This was human. And I didn't want to believe it. But deep down, I knew exactly who it was. I didn't say anything that day. Just cleaned it up like I was removing evidence from a crime scene. 2 days later, it happened again. Same spot. Same smell. This time I didn't clean it. I put my outdoor camera in a better position, angled it low and wide, aimed directly at the fence line. I went to bed that night with a pit in my stomach and woke up to confirmation I should have never asked for. There she was, Kendra, bathrobe wide open, cigarette dangling from her lips. stumbling toward the fence like a drunk in a zombie movie. She looked both ways, squatted right against my property line, and relieved herself like it was the most natural thing in the world. She didn't even flinch, just stood up afterward, adjusted her robe, and wandered back toward the porch like she'd gone out for a breath of fresh air. I watched the clip 3 times, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to confirm it was real. Later that day, I saw her out by the trash cans and decided, against all better judgment, to say something. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I just said, "Kendra, I saw you on the camera by the fence. You can't do that. That's my yard." She stared at me like I'd grown a second head. Then she smiled. A slow, lopsided grin that made me wish I'd never spoken at all. Without saying a word, she marched across the lawn, got right up to my fence, and spat directly on the camera. Full loogie, dripping down the lens. Then she screamed, at the top of her lungs, "Record it again, bitch, and I'll shit in the pool." I don't even have a pool. But now I'm terrified to get one. Because if I did, if I ever had the audacity to install so much as an inflatable kiddie pool back there, I fully believe she'd follow through. Not even as a threat, just as a challenge. That's the kind of neighbor I have. A woman who thinks nothing of treating a fence like a public toilet and who threatens to defile imaginary water features because someone had the nerve to set up a camera on their own property. Every time it rains, I find myself checking that corner of the yard like I'm guarding a sacred burial site. I don't let guests go back there anymore. I'm afraid one day I'll forget, and someone will step in something they should never have seen, much less smelled. And the worst part is, when the sun goes down and their music starts back up and the slurred arguments begin again under the flickering porch light, I can't stop wondering what's next. Because when someone crosses a line like that and laughs while doing it, you know the line was never there for them to begin with. Dealing with the police turned out to be its own kind of performance art. I had reached my limit. Between the garbage, the screaming, the public defecation, the diapers, the stolen mower, and the growing sense that my property was slowly becoming part of some unspoken neighborhood hellscape, I finally picked up the phone and filed a complaint. I didn't expect miracles. I just wanted someone, anyone, to make it stop, or at least act like this wasn't normal. They showed up about an hour later, 2 cruisers pulling onto the curb with lights off but windows down, like they were just checking in on an old friend. When the officers got out, I recognized the look immediately. Not urgency, not concern, but exhaustion. One of them, a tall guy with a sunburned neck and the kind of belt sag that only comes from 20 years on the job, walked up to me and said, "Yeah, we know them." That was it. No introductions. Just resignation. I told him everything. The screaming, the fence garbage, the used diapers, the smell, the threats, the bathroom incidents. He nodded like he'd heard it all before, because, as it turns out, he had. "We find them about 15 times, he said, flipping through a little notepad like he was reading off a grocery list. "Noise, public indecency, nuisance violations. They just don't pay." I asked what happens then. If someone just ignores the system entirely. He shrugged. "The city sends notices, then ignores the unpaid notices. After a while, it just becomes paperwork nobody wants to deal with." Great. While he was still talking, the other officer went over to Doug in Kendra's yard. Doug was shirtless, of course, with a beer in one hand and a hammer in the other like he was about to repair a lawn chair using interpretive dance. Kendra was in her robe again, but this time she had shorts on over it. Not that it mattered. Because while the cops were busy talking to Doug about keeping it down and respecting property lines, Kendra, in full view of my porch camera that wasn't turned on that day because of a power reset I hadn't noticed, walked straight over to my steps. Didn't knock. Didn't speak. Just made direct, terrifying eye contact with me through the window, then dropped her shorts, squatted, and defecated right there on my porch. On the stairs. On my stairs. And the worst part wasn't the act itself. It was the dead silence afterward. The way she stood up like she'd just tied her shoes. The way she adjusted her robe and walked away like she was done brushing her teeth. No shame. No fear. No hesitation. She even flicked her cigarette, but onto my doormat on her way out like it was punctuation. I sprinted out the front door and waved down the officers like I was on fire. They turned and looked back at me like I was overreacting. I stopped myself, waving toward the stairs. She just crapped on my porch. Both officers looked over. One squinted. The other glanced back toward the property line. Then one of them, the first guy, said, "We didn't see it." I stared at him. "What do you mean you didn't see it?" "No video. No eyewitness besides you," he said. "We can't act on that." I pointed at the mess. The literal evidence sitting in plain view like a steaming exclamation mark at the end of this waking nightmare. "It's right there." "We can't confirm who did it," he replied. "Could have been anyone." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear my hair out. Instead, I asked if I could file a report anyway. He handed me a clipboard and a pen and told me to describe the incident in detail. Meanwhile, Doug was laughing in the background, probably because he knew exactly how useless the whole thing was. Kendra was back on her porch, drinking something pink out of a measuring cup and shouting song lyrics at passing cars. The cops left 15 minutes later, told me to document everything and call if it escalates. Escalates from what exactly? What level of biological warfare does it take to warrant more than a shrug? That night, I bought a second camera, and extra memory cards, and a canister of industrial disinfectant strong enough to take the paint off concrete. Because apparently, in this town, justice needs an HD recording or it didn't happen. And on that particular day, all I had was a ruined morning, a filthy staircase, and the growing feeling that I was one more incident away from becoming a full-blown conspiracy theory. It was supposed to be a normal Sunday. Nothing fancy, just some grilled chicken, a few beers, and a quiet evening on the porch with my girlfriend, who had driven 2 hours from her place just to spend the weekend. I'd been looking forward to it all week. I'd marinated the chicken thighs the night before, garlic, lemon, a little smoked paprika, nothing complicated but enough to make it feel like a meal worth sharing. The coals were perfect, gray with just the right glow underneath, and for once, the music from next door was off. Doug must have passed out early. Kendra was nowhere in sight. It felt like a tiny miracle. I had just put the last piece of chicken on the grill and was heading back inside to grab plates and tongs. My girlfriend, Mia, was upstairs changing. I remember checking my phone, 3 minutes, tops. Maybe 4, if I count the time I spent cursing at myself for forgetting the damn paper towels. When I walked back out, the grill lid was half open, smoke still curling up into the dusk air. The smell hit me before the sight did. Nothing but heat and char. No chicken. Just grease stains on the grate where the meat had been. For a second, I froze. Like maybe I'd hallucinated the whole thing. Maybe I never put the chicken on. Maybe I had a stroke. I looked around, confused, like the pieces would click into place if I just stood still long enough. Then I heard it. A wet, satisfied chewing sound. Smack smack. Followed by a deep, sloppy sigh. I turned my head, and there she was. Kendra. On her porch. Bathrobe tied in a crooked knot, hair matted to one side. Standing barefoot with a whole chicken thigh in her hand like it was a turkey leg at a Renaissance fair. Her chin was slick with grease. Her forearms, too. There was a dark stain running down her wrist, and for a brief moment, I couldn't tell if it was marinade or sweat. She didn't flinch. She didn't hide. She didn't pretend she hadn't done it. Instead, she made eye contact with me, sucked the skin off the bone like she was trying to win a bet, and yelled loud enough for the whole block to hear. Thank you for dinner, chef. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I just stood there holding 2 empty plates like an idiot while Mia stepped out behind me and asked what was wrong. I didn't even have the heart to explain. What was I supposed to say? Sorry, babe. The neighbor stole our food off the grill and ate it with her bare hands while smiling like a cartoon villain. There's no graceful way to recover from that. Kendra licked her fingers individually, one by one. Then she waved, still chewing, and disappeared inside. Just like that. No shame. No apology. No concern that what she'd done might be even remotely insane. I didn't bother calling the cops. What was the point? They'd already shown they needed video footage just to acknowledge human feces on my stairs. Stolen chicken wouldn't even make the report. It'd be a joke at best, a line in a dispatcher's daily log. Dispute over grilled poultry. No action taken. Instead, I tossed the plates in the sink and went back outside to shut the grill down. There was still heat coming off the coals, but the meal was gone, and the mood with it. Mia tried to laugh it off, said we could order pizza, but I could see it in her eyes. That quiet unease. That question hovering in the back of her mind. What kind of place is this? What kind of people do you live next to? I didn't have an answer. All I knew was that I'd done everything right. Moved to a quiet street. Bought a house. Kept to myself. Tried to be polite. Tried to coexist. But next door lived a woman who thought nothing of treating my porch like a toilet and my grill like her personal buffet. And now, somehow, that had become my reality. Right now, I sleep with headphones on. Not because I want to, but because it's the only way I can block out the sounds from next door, the slamming doors, the shouting matches that blend into drunken singing, the barking of that diapered dog at 3 in the morning for reasons only it understands. I use noise-canceling ones that cost more than my couch, but it's either that or lie in bed listening to Kendra scream about energy vampires, while Doug tries to DJ from a Bluetooth speaker wedged inside a bucket. I no longer cook outside. I don't even bring groceries in through the front if I can help it. I order delivery and meet the driver at the street. I don't want anyone seeing me walk toward my house with food. I keep the porch lights off. I installed motion sensors not to protect from intruders, but to warn me if Kendra's back with another plastic bag full of wet trash or worse. I keep a shovel on the porch now, not for gardening, but because when I find something left for me, whether it's a pile of beer bottles, a busted humidifier, or another dog diaper filled to capacity, I want to be able to scoop it quickly without touching anything. I'm saving money to move. Every extra dollar, every freelance gig, every spare cent goes into that fund. I don't tell people exactly why when they ask. I just say the area turned out different than I expected. They nod like they understand, but they don't. Nobody does unless they've lived next to it. The constant invasion of space. The feeling that your home, the place you worked for, saved for, dreamed about, is being eaten away by someone else's filth and chaos, one empty can and shouted obscenity at a time. I've started looking at tear gas online. I haven't bought it yet, but I think about it. I read reviews. I bookmark tabs. I imagine the moment where I finally have to stand my ground and there's no one left to call. Because it's not paranoia when your neighbor has already defecated on your steps and thanked you for dinner after robbing your grill. It's not overreacting when the police shrug and tell you 15 unpaid fines are just part of the system now. And the biggest shift, the one that keeps me up more than the noise, is that I'm learning to be less kind. I used to be the guy who waved at everyone, who baked cookies for the neighbors his first week, who believed that keeping the peace was always worth it. But now I get it. There's no reasoning with people who live like the rules don't apply to them. There's no good faith agreement with someone who thinks your fence is a toilet and your trash can is a buffet. Alcoholic neighbors aren't a quirky sitcom plot. They're not colorful. They're not a funny story for dinner parties. They're a form of social terror, a slow erosion of sanity, a reminder every day that your privacy, your effort, your dignity, none of it matters to someone who's decided you're just another background character in their mess of a life. So I keep the camera running. I double-check the locks. I sleep with one eye open, headphones over my ears, a shovel by the door. And I wait for the day I can finally leave. Until then, I just try to stay quiet. Try to stay sane.